Does the world really need another What is the OSR video? Why, yes, it does. And we're going to do it today on Greyhawk Ragnar. So, this perennial question of what is the OSR has bubbled up again in a couple of different places. Yeah, there's talk about, is the OSR relevant and on some blogs and on videos and stuff. So I thought I would take yet another crack at it. And with what I would like to think is not a unique perspective, but it's one that you don't hear enough. And it's really this. The OSR is not about any particular game, right? It's not about Dungeons and Dragons. It's not about any particular edition. It's not about cutting off things after 1999. It's not. It's not about firsty or basic or second or anything like that. It's not about rules light. It's not about rules heavy. It's not about fantasy versus science fiction. It's not about TSR versus all the other games that were out in the 70s and 80s. It's not about any of those things. What makes the OSR is the fact that you feel empowered to change the game yourself. And this is fundamental. This was what role-playing games were like in the 70s and to a lesser extent in the 80s. You had the Little Brown Books, or you had Holmes Basic, and there were fanzines like Alarums and Excursions, and then there were real magazines like Strategic Review, and then Dragon, and then White Dwarf, and there was a host of everything. Every little town, some kids got together and made their own fanzine with some optional rules and stuff. You could go into Dragon and get all kinds of different optional rules and classes and stuff like that. We would mishmash stuff from 4 or 5 different games together. We would use the combat rules and critical hits from Arms Law before there was Rollmaster. This was Arms Law and Claw Law, and we'd take that and then we'd put in the magic system from D&D, and then we'd have some classes from Chivalry and Sorcery, and we'd all mush it together and call it D&D. It was just the generic, like the word Band-Aid is generic. And other games back in the day, back in the 70s and the 80s, were born of this do-it-yourself attitude. That's where Tunnels and Trolls came from. That's where RuneQuest came from. That's where Chivalry and Sorcery came from. That's where a whole gazillion games came out of this attitude of, well, here's D&D. Arduin is a perfect example. Here's this game that I think I could do a little bit better on, so I'm going to either make my own or I'm going to take it and change it and do it that way. It's that attitude, that do it yourself. You can do it. You can change whatever you want to change. And that attitude was lost for a long, long time as people became more and more dependent on official publications from like Wizards of the Coast. People were using fewer and fewer homebrew settings and homebrew rules, and they were using more official stuff. And as the time wore on, that got even more and more pronounced, where you would have these adventure paths, and then everybody was playing the same adventure path. Yeah, you had some adventures back in the day. You had the giants and the drow, and you had the Temple of Elemental Evil, and there were certainly adventures, but they were just one of a zillion things that you would play because they were so quick to be played. You could do giants each giants module in a night. So you needed a lot more material back then because the game played faster, and there was no alternative but to make your own. Um, and that was really lost for a few decades. And then, lo and behold, a couple of things came together that reinvigorated that aspect of the hobby. The first thing was the OGL, where the rules for the then current version of the game were kind of opened up and you can make your own stuff with it, and we encourage it, and all we need you to do is not use these terms or monsters, and you have to include this this wordage, this wording in here, and go to town. And then that's when the explosion happened with 3.5. And something else happened too, because that around that same time was when, and, maybe a little bit later, was when you really saw the rise of desktop publishing and the beginnings of print on demand. And once all that came together, once you had the availability of the rules and people, of an older generation recalling fondly the dynamic um, of being able to fiddle with the rules, that's when the OSR started to really happen in earnest. And it started obviously, with D&D and going back to first edition and then basic and so forth. But to my mind, any game that lets you that gives power to the game master and power to the players to change it, that's OSR. It's not about specific mechanics. It's not about specific genres. It's not about specific IP. It's about giving, empowering the game master and the player to take the game and make it their own. Change the rules, change the settings, change all the stuff, smush things together, make it mishmash, make it your own. And that is what the OSR is all about. That spirit of inventiveness that was lost for a couple decades. And then a confluence of a few events happened to bring it back into the fore. And I think that's a great thing. That is, to my mind, the key of what the OSR is. It's that spirit of inventiveness. It's the spirit of, you don't need us to tell you what to do. You can go ahead and take what we've given you and change it and add it and recombine it in weird and wonderful ways and come up with something new and fun for you and your players. That, to me, is the true core, the true kernel of the OSR. Anyway, hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk to you all later.
Thanks for watching today's video. Please remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Below you'll find links to my Patreon, which helps make these videos possible. You'll also find the web store where you can buy my books, and my blog where you'll find all sorts of free downloads and other articles. Thanks, and have a great day.